I think we can begin now. The rest of the participants can keep joining in between. Good afternoon, everyone, and I welcome you all to the fifth day of the 7-day online faculty development program titled Sustainable Development Goals and English Literature. I extend a very warm welcome to our esteemed guest speaker of today's session, Dr. Monali Bhattacharya, Associate Professor, Department of Humanities and Social Science, JP Institute of Information and Technology, Noida. Ma'am, we are extremely elated to have you here with us. In yesterday's session on role of individual and social psychology in Indian English literature, Professor Jagdish Patra elucidated how literature is the best hope for humankind. It teaches us lessons of humanity in a world that lacks empathy. It is imperative to generate a spirit of compassion for taking a substantive step towards achieving sustainable development goals. The Sustainable Development Goals must place the human rights and principles of equality and non-discrimination at its heart, ensuring the inclusion of marginalized, disempowered, and excluded groups. The topic for today's session is giving center stage to marginal voices of subalterns, need of the hour for substantial development, sustainable development. Before ma'am proceeds with her lecture, I would request Pooja, our student volunteer, to introduce our distinguished guest, Dr. Monali Bhattacharya, to the participants.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. Dr. Monali Bhattacharya is an Associate Professor, Department of Humanities and Social Science, and Associate Dean, Quality Assurance and Communications at the JP Institute of Information Technology, Noida. She holds a PhD degree in English from Allahabad University. Dr. Bhattacharya has been teaching for 18 years now, with 12 years of teaching experience at Banasthali University and thereafter at JP Institute of Information Technology. She has guided 7 PhDs, 12 MPhil dissertations, and has also established the 3 language labs at the JP Institute of Information Technology. In addition to serving as a plenary speaker, resource person, session chair, and committee member at conferences, she has organized 2 international conferences, many seminars, and FDPs. Her areas of research include interdisciplinary and comparative studies. She has edited English books of CBSE, apart from CBSE manuals and handbooks on experiential learning. She has published 2 books and numerous papers in national and international refereed indexed journals. Thank you.
In fact, I should say thank you, Pooja, for, certainly I felt that, yes, I am important. So it is all words, and words alone are what materialize in today's world. Thank you, Pooja, for such a lovely introduction. Thank you, Tulika and Sugandha, for having helped her with such beautiful words. So shall I proceed, or you still have got something else to introduce? Shall I?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am, you can proceed.
Okay. So welcome all. I know, nowadays in the online mode, it's really very difficult to manage with the FDP. And somehow, when we talk of FDP, FDP means Faculty Development Program. So we need to have certain key takeaways whenever we uh, join any FDP. I mean, whether I am a speaker or whether I am just a participant, if I don't take something back from today's lecture or any day's lecture, then it is a huge waste of my 2 hours of time. So with that thing in mind, I would just request one thing, because all of us, I know, I also have been attending FDPs, and when I don't get a DL, so today I asked Sugandha specially to please send me an invite so that I get a DL. So we were asked by AICTE that we should be having 7 days FDP of UHV. That is, UHV is Universal Human Development, which has become like a compulsory program for now, the teachers nowadays. But you won't believe the institute, 7 days deal, impossible. That is not something that you are given. So ultimately what happened was that I was taking classes, I was attending meetings, and I was also doing the FDP, and it was wonderful experience whenever I could concentrate on whatsoever was going on in the computer. otherwise it was like a very, I felt like, yes, I was really a superwoman in those days. So this is what I would request, that towards the end, I mean, I know you all have your engagements and you might be putting up the earphone and then being engaged in some other task while I'm giving my lecture, because you all belong to the field of literature. So my initial part would be introducing what subalternity is all about, or who have been the subalterns till now, and how these groups, these historians, these eminent personalities have been able to convince us that yes, subalterns are important and we need to bring them to the mainstay. But my second half of the lecture, I would request that whatsoever you are doing, you should be able to complete that, so that we can have a little more interactive session. And that what I was talking about, that key takeaway, that is something that we can discuss. And as the title suggests, that that is the need of the hour. So I would rather, my main focus is, once I have finished off with what subalternity is all about, that we need to change our mindset. We need to make, I mean, it's not about can the subaltern speak. It is about, yes, they have to speak, they should speak, but more important to that, we have to be there with them. So that is something that is not possible only in one FDP, that I speak and the change happens. So it is only possible when we all come together and we all become those voices, those people who can bring about the change. Then I think that today's FDP would be really successful. It would not just be another certificate for me or for you. So with that, I would start. So I would share my screen. I have, I mean, generally it's what you all have gone through the books. As I said, that my initial part is about subalternity. Mostly the teachers must have come across the subalternity. Sorry, Delhi pollution. So I am having a very severe throat infection as well. I think Tulika Sugandha must be thinking, why is ma'am's voice so husky? It's all because of Delhi ka din hai. So anyway, but yes, the first few parts would be because it's not possible that all of us would have read everything about literature everywhere. So I just wanted to give a recap or an introduction to what subalternity is all about. Once we have understood, then we can come to the discussion parts, that how can we really bring them to the forefront. So shall I share my screen? And if anything goes wrong, Sugandha or Tulika, please tell me, okay? Because once I share my screen, I am not, I mean, I am visible to you, but I'm not able to see what's happening there.
Yes, ma'am, we'll take over.
So I'll put it on the reading mode, right? So when we talk of subalternity, generally speaking, when I was myself a student, it was always Gayatri Spivak who was on the forefront. When I was preparing for my UGC NET exam also, the essay which really, I mean, I was very intrigued by the essay. That was her essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? But when we try to understand the history of subalternity, it has gone through many, I mean, not only the subject areas have been different, but also its definition has altered. So when we start off with, it started off with Marxist approach. So Antonio Gramsci was the one who was working on the Italian, society, and he referred it for those inferior people who were there, the marginal people, the I mean, whether it was because of the ethnicity, whether it was because of the class, gender, of the people who were at the lower strata of the society. And he used this word subaltern for them, to say that they were the oppressed class. So that was what was there from capitalism and the worker class that he took up, and oppressor and the oppressed were the way of his looking at it. So it was basically those southern Italian workers for whom he brought this terminology into the forefront. But later on, I mean, this is one thing which is very fascinating for the ones who have not gone through the subaltern studies. When we look at the rise of the subaltern studies, there are lots of Indians who have actually brought it to the forefront. One of them being very important is Ranajit Guha. I think many of you might have heard about Partha Chatterjee as well. Is there anyone who has heard? Recently, there was a controversy at JNU about that Azadi, wherein Arundhati Roy and the rest, they went. No? Okay. So, I mean, I thought that maybe some of us might be aware of. So, I mean, because in our intellectual circles, when we talk of, I mean, Partha Chatterjee is one of the subaltern voices today who is making rounds, and there have been lots of political things also involving him. But I wanted to bring the focus that it was not Partha Chatterjee because of him. Suddenly, we are talking of subalternity. It was rather Ranajit Guha, and he started off this entire movement in India, and it was his seminal essay, which was like his monograph, the elementary aspects of peasant insurgency, and in his subalternities one, he was the one who brought it to the forefront in South Asia. So he was actually, I mean, his main aim was that he wanted to challenge the authoritative voices. There was this Cambridge way of looking at Indian history. So Ranajit Guha was the one who said that our history needs to be rewritten by us only. So it is not so that the Britishers would tell us or the West would tell us what we are good in and what we are not so good in. And it was at suppressed voices of our Indians was supposed to be redeemed. It was supposed to be brought to the forefront. And with that aim in mind, he started off this movement. So this was, I mean, there were lots of people who came together who started working on the subalternity, but it was from the historical perspective of Indian mindset. So subalternity was at its peak in 1980s. So there was this subalternity and subaltern studies group which was formed. We will call it SSG because that was the way how we all discovered SSG was so important. And Ranajit Guha was very important, staunch person behind this. And there were many other people whosoever we have learned about or we have come across in our life as subaltern voices, the ones who have been the leaders of subaltern group, they have all been somewhere or the other associated with this subaltern studies group. So these people, they started off a magazine which was Subaltern Studies, writing on South Asian history and society. And as Guha himself said, that basically it was to rectify the underlying biases of elitism. So when we talk of elitism here, elitism means that Western canon of thinking. So it was basically to give voice. It was whatever they had projected our history as, that was supposed to be rectified and altered as per the SSG. So there were lots of people who joined this group. So Ranajit Guha was himself one of the main spokesmen. Apart from him, there were Gyan Pandey, Partha Chatterjee, David Arnold, Rashid Amin, and David Hardiman, who started voicing. And they were the ones, I mean, for the first years, first 3 volumes of the magazine, they were at the forefront. And they tried to speak about anything and everything which was about India versus the West. But later on, as subsequent volumes came in, some very new, radical minded young authors came in, like Swapan Das Gupta, Ramchandra Guha, Gayatri Spivak, Tanika Sarkar, Bernardes Khan. You might have heard about a couple of them at different places. Like when we talk of history, how the history has been recreated, created, whatever it is, you might have come across Ramchandra Guha's name. As I said, that Swapan Das Gupta, Gayatri Spivak, these are the people who we all have read when we were reading about subalternity. So basically, it was all of these voices, they came together and they started looking at different aspects of how we had been manipulated, how we had been silenced, and what was the reality behind our existence. So it could not be only man, I mean, it could not be that man of the East and man of the West that we were talking of. So various other things came into the forefront, and that is where I would want you to understand now. I mean, I would come back to the main point that this was what it was, the historically what it was. But subalternity, in other words, during that time, that is still from 1980s to the beginning of the 20s, we can say that anyone who was oppressed was a subaltern. So can anyone tell me, like, if I talk of hegemony, if I talk of this somebody who is oppressor and the other one is oppressing, what could be, I mean, you could write in the chat also. So is it only that we have to speak about history, or it could be anyone else in terms of any other category that we can talk then about them as being subalterns? Can anyone just tell me, just a wake up call? Like, what could be the other groups wherein there could be one oppressor and the other could be the oppressed one?
Ma'am, in terms of race or different racial groups,
Yes, exactly.
then,
So the
then it,
whites versus blacks, that could be the subaltern.
In
The
terms of
blacks could be
gender,
the subaltern.
in terms of gender,
Very good. Yes,
ma'am,
yes,
in
in
terms
terms
of
of gender.
gender,
Yes, man and woman. So, I mean, though I would, I mean, I always used to joke with Sugandha and Tulika. I used to tell them that historically speaking, females are the ones who are the subaltern. But when you visit Vanasthali, it is just the opposite. It is like the boys who used to visit Vanasthali, it was like they were always with their heads down, and the girls were the ones who were criticizing and commenting on the boys. So, yes, but generally speaking, if it is not Vanasthali, then females are the subalterns. Very nice, very good. Anyone else? I mean, anything else that can be brought in?
it could also be in
Ma'am,
terms of
class.
Dalits, ma'am. The Dalits.
Pardon? I could not
The
get you.
Dalit people.
Yes, yes, yes. So when we talk of the caste, then again, see what we are trying to do is first we did with the help of that is East and West. Then, like Sugandha said, that it was basis of race that we tried to discover. Next was the gender. Third, I mean, we are trying to do it on the basis of the caste. We can do it on the basis of the class also. So wherever, I mean, we cannot talk of, and this is what we are trying to talk of when we are talking of subalternity, is that excuse me, uh, we cannot live without binaries. Binaries are must in order, a must for us in order to understand that somebody has to be on the top and the other has to be below. So if it is day, night becomes your subaltern, right? So in the binaries, always there would be one on the top and the other on the, I mean, downward thing. And that is what, because we would always like white, daytime, rich, money, west, power. So this, which is on the downward type, that would always be the second one, the subaltern. Nobody is willing to listen to the second one, let alone how is the second one ever going to voice, because we are always going to find that to be secondary, not second, it is secondary. And that is what they were trying to say. So this is where I would like to play a just 2 minutes video. It is like amalgamation of whatsoever I said in terms of what this SSG wanted to say. So from here we will deviate in our discussion, but before that I'll share my screen and I'll play this recording. Just a moment. uh, shall I share my entire screen? Then maybe this would be there. Otherwise, बहुत बार एक में नहीं आता है ना. Chrome tab. Okay. Visible?
yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Okay.
2 minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
The subaltern, essentially the distinction was made between elites and subaltern. We were trying to avoid naming, let's say, things like ruling class and working class and peasants and so on. The understanding, we make the general claim that there are elites in society who have power, and there is a relation of domination and subordination between elite groups who have power and subaltern groups who do not have power. And the subaltern groups can be of many, many different kinds. They could be, you know, as I said, workers or peasants, or they could be distinguished by caste groups. So the elite groups would generally tend to be upper caste, and subaltern caste groups would be lower castes, Dalits, etc. Or it could be between gender-wise, for instance, between patriarchs, male patriarchs, and women, who would be, in that case, women would be subaltern. So this is the general relationship of domination and subordination. And we were interested in looking at the processes by which there is actually a subordination of these groups, and what are the moments of resistance. When do subaltern groups resist? How do they resist? What are the forms of resistance? And the forms of resistance we discovered was not necessarily, they were usually very rare moments when they actually resisted in a kind of aggressive way. There was a lot of resistance, which was only very momentary, sometimes even not very overt, uh, sly ways of resisting. Uh, those are the kinds of relations and events and histories we were trying to look at when we were doing subaltern studies.
Okay, just a moment. Yeah. So, as Dr. Partha Chatterjee was one of the most important figures when we talk of subaltern group, that is SSG group. But what I want to specify here is that once Spivak started working on this, Spivak said, I mean, it was because her work deviated from historicism, and because she was herself working on Derrida, so she was very much into deconstruction, and she was herself a very big feminist. But then the thing that she brought out in her various essays was that when we talk of feminists, the females are able to voice for the females, but are they able to voice for the females who can be real subalterns? When I say subalterns, so when it is man versus woman, so it is the female who is the subaltern, but inside the group of females also, there could be another subaltern, no? Are you getting it? So for
Yes,
example,
ma'am. Yes,
of the
ma'am.
tribal women, when we are talking of the women who belong to very poor sections, the Dalit women, the worker class women. So the females who were speaking at that time, who were trying to talk about the feminism, the female grounding theory was based on the experiences of the elite females only. So it was not actually what we call as the real subaltern. So that is why she said that though Mahashweta Devi, like she started working on the elites, today you have got Arundhati Roy, she speaks about these kind of things. So they are the females who are, when you compare them in binary format between the man and the women, then of course they are the subaltern because man is the dominant group. But when you compare inside that one group, then they are the ones who are giving voices to these females, the ones who are more oppressed. But how much justice are they able to do? It would never be told in the way as when we give the voice to the real subaltern, that is that real oppressed group, whether it is the Dalit woman. So Mahashweta Devi speaking for them, it is like looking through a glass. But if that subaltern lady speaks for herself, then we would get the reality. This is where I would want to bring that when we spoke about just now, that blacks or the racial subordination, that is whites versus the blacks. So if you remember, there was the slave history. There were lots of slave narratives in 18th century in American literature. So if we had not given importance to those slave narratives, would we ever have thought that Barack Obama would have been the president of America? Still, we are combating, definitely. I mean, still there is a black versus white versus black everywhere. But at least that divide has made mitigated only because they spoke for themselves. In the same way, when we talk of India, now we are talking of fourth world literature. But who are the writers of that fourth world literature? That is what we have to understand. So ultimately, again, in fourth world literature, it is, I mean, Mahashweta Devi, Arundhati Roy, I still remember like there was one child who worked under me for an MPhil dissertation. So she brought this Valmiki's Jhutan. But my point is just one or two writers writing autobiographies, that is not going to be enough to bring them from the marginal parts to the main forefront. We need to allow them to speak more, and that is only possible when we change our mindset. We are ready to listen to them. So that is where now I would, I mean, as I said, that my second part would be a little different from what subaltern studies has been all about. So shall I share my screen? Right. Is there anyone who wishes to ask me anything? I would be very happy to answer, like the change, what I said just now. My slides are visible?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
This is what I just now said in terms of what I felt, that Spivak, she joined SSG as an extravagant subalternist, and like it was more of the feminism that she was working upon, but then she wanted to bring in the situations of the poorer women, the not the elite women. So it marginalized women of the third world countries. That was what she wanted to talk about in terms of subalternity. So when she brought in subalternity, so it was very different. So I'll try to play this if Sugandha mine does not get played, because Spivak ko sunna bahut zaruri hai if you really want to understand the way how we are proceeding, because she is the one who gave me my point of view in terms of how we can bring them into the forefront through the literature, because she ended that they cannot be because they are not giving voice, but then we can try to give them voice through the right education. So I'll play. If I just click on it, it would be visible or not. That is something that Sugandha, you have to tell me. Okay. Is it playing? No. This was one in which I was facing problem. So I thought that maybe. Sugandha?
Yes, ma'am. Do you want me to play it?
Yeah, if you can play this, I'll stop sharing. Only this Spivak one.
Ma'am, if you stop sharing your screen, then I will start sharing mine.
Sugandha, I have stopped sharing.
Okay, ma'am. I'll share my screen.
I think if I wanted to talk about the prominent people who have figured in the life of my mind, it would be Jacques Derrida, Mahashweta Devi, Ranjit Guha, Bimal Motilal. Like being in the position of not in anyone's school. So I'm in the happy position. My relationship with Derrida, therefore, is that of an old friend. I believe he respects me, but he does not count on me as a member of his entourage. I'm considered by the deconstructivists to be too vulgar, by the Marxists to be too deconstructive, too theoretical, by the feminists to be too male identified and not single issue enough, because I believe in a much broader spectrum. And so, to an extent, I have, and the South Asianists think I'm not an expert, therefore I don't know what I'm talking about, so that I have a certain kind of, the hybridists and the globalists think that I'm too much of a Luddite because I'm constantly talking about the post-colonial countries back there rather than just the globalized migrant space. I met Derrida in 71. Mahashweta, I met in 79. I think part of my relationship with Mahashweta is also an extraordinary sort of kinship of spirit. I really feel that she and I resonate, and I think she feels it too. So I have these kinds of bonds with her, which are not just the sort of serious contact between great writer and her translator, or social activist and somebody who follows along. I keep myself focused in one area, the Rajnagar area of Purulia district, which is where Maharshita has a group working called Poshtimbongo Kheriya Sabor Kolyan Samiti. And I interest myself in the teaching of literacy to small children in the most deprived areas where certainly nothing like a government literacy program can be seen to operate. That has taught me a great deal about the meaning of that big difficult word democracy in our parts of the world. My project is not to do good, my project is to learn. I feel that having developed this analytical machine since 1946 when I entered kindergarten, I'm muscle bound with knowledge.
Sugandha, you can stop here.
Nice.
Yes. So this was crucial for us to see. I mean, because this is what I would like all of us to go towards. We are all educated. We are all, I mean, I would not say that as she says or as she is intellectuals, but yes, we have had our own learnings. So if we can use this education as she used in terms of feminism, there are lots and lots of things to think about, that how can we bring them into the forefront to actually talk about sustainable development. So when we shall I share my screen? So I'll just come to my second part of what I propose to speak on. So when we talk of this subaltern, then I mean, if we start with how the subalternity came in lexically, I mean, it is under other. This is what we have to understand. The Latin word subalternus, which gave us this word subaltern, that means it is under other. It is not even other. While when we talk of post-colonialism, when we talk of Marxism, when we talk of historicism, that is new historicism, this is what we speak of, that we are the others to the whites, the Britishers, the West. So this is where subaltern refers to inferiority of something or someone, and to what level that inferiority stands, that is what we have to understand. So lower ranks in all respects are subalterns when you compare them to the upper ranks. Sorry. But we are dealing with, historically speaking, the subordinated, downtrodden, marginalized, oppressed people. But when we talk of this binary thing, then that is where we have to move towards, and that is my proposal to move towards. We have already gone through Marxism, we have seen historiography, we have seen post-colonialism, feminism, but now it is the time when we can come to cultural studies, and that is where we can talk of subalternity, not only in terms of these small binaries that we have been talking of in terms of race, class, caste, gender. Subalternity can be in terms of, even when I say, like yesterday, I was talking to one of my research scholars, and I told her that because there is a pollution so much here, that we should all go with haldi ka doodh. I mean, as I read in newspapers, it's quite healthy. So she said that, okay, ma'am, you mean to say that golden nectar? So I asked her, I mean, is this the new name that you people have given, golden nectar? So she said, huh, golden nectar. Golden nectar means, I mean, this turmeric milk that we have, that is called as the golden nectar. So I searched, there is Blinkit, which is very common nowadays, we use to get the things. And there was this turmeric latte, which the youngsters are all into drinking, because post COVID, everybody realized, and more importantly, the market realized that turmeric milk, or haldi ka doodh, what we used to call it, that is something which has got lots of benefit. So why don't we use this as they use the Coke diet? So there was this turmeric latte created, and as soon as this word latte came in, our youngsters, through the marketing strategy, suddenly brought that subaltern uh, doodh, what we used to have, that haldi ka doodh, suddenly coming to the forefront. So this is what I felt like that was very important for us to think about, that what is the subalternity. Subalternity does not mean only when we are talking of the people. It is like whenever we are talking of binaries, there are going to be subalterns, and we need to let the subaltern come to the forefront. So when we talk of this Gramsci, when we talk of Guhas, they have all been talking of different people. But when Spivak came, she actually was the worst one to dismantle this entire Gramscian concept of subaltern autonomy. And that is where we have to rethink when she said that subalterns cannot ever speak because they can never be heard. And if you read these lines, she sums up the narrative of subaltern by not noting they cannot speak or cannot be heard and can never be heard. So this is what we need to think of when we are talking of subaltern. And this is what I mean to propose for my second part, that what they have all been talking to us till now is all about alterns. That is the other. What we need to talk about is the subaltern, that is other to the other. So when we say oppressor, that is the self. Oppressed is the altern, that is the other. But subaltern is that other to the other. So if we talk about as that is Ranaji Guha or all of these people, when they were combating with the Cambridge elites, Cambridge way of the Western canons, speaking about our history. So these English people, of course, they are our oppressors, but those Indian people, or rather this term which was there, which was very common in post-colonial literature, Babudam, they were the others to these Britishers. And when we talk of the subaltern, these marginalized groups who did not have access to, let alone the other, I mean, neither the other nor the mm, oppressor. So these are the real subalterns. And we have to bring these to the forefront if we really want to talk about changing the world and changing the world scenario. So when we talk of sustainable development, that is, we are trying to talk about holistic development, and we are trying to talk about a continuous holistic development, which in which we should be allowing everybody to speak. Then only this whole, I mean, dismantling of binaries can be there, and we can all be there. So this is what I wanted to talk to all of you, that when we are talking male female, we should also talk about the transgender. When we are talking of the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, upper caste and the lower caste, then there are below the lower castes also. Today we have given reservations. There are, I mean, in the lower caste, there are many of them who have benefited through the reservation, but there are the ones who have not been able to benefit because it has not reached at all. So those lowest castes, those tribals, they need to be talked about when we are talking of the subalternity. So we all talk about middle class. So even lower to lowest class would be in terms of class size. So, but this is where I would want to propose that ultimately anything which is lowest in the binary, like when I talk of food also, this might seem like very, I mean, why has mom put it up? So when we talk of even in food category, see, pizzas, or like you have got all your Western food items, which would always be on the top in the binary. And these are some of the Indian foods. I mean, paneer tikka is just a representative, which has been able to make its inroad, and it is trying to make its market. But what is not able to make its market is this ragi dosa or anything which we Indians also, as I said, that as soon as turmeric milk became turmeric latte, so we all were happy to have the turmeric milk. But as long as it was haldi ka doodh, it was not something that we were ready to have it. Or rather, if I go a little beyond, uh, we have got in our society like drinks, they are on the top. After that, of course, you should consume the tea. But once you are into the right age group, you are not to be called as a child, then 2 glasses of milk a must know. I mean, doodh bacche peete hain. So that is how we look at this whole thing about. But then if we really want to talk about the subalternity and the sustainable development, this is my proposal, that subaltern knowledge system, which is inherently local, place based, linked to the social relations, which is traditional, indigenous knowledge, which may be embedded with the culture, the traditions, worldviews. Such knowledge needs to be brought to the forefront. Then only is subaltern image that we have created can be dismantled, and we can actually talk about speaking in terms of making the change, giving voice to what we want to give voice to. And that is the proposal, that subalterns have to be heard, brought to the center, allowed to speak for themselves. So from here in onwards, I'll not share my screen. I would like to have discussion, because now I guess you have understood what I was trying to aim at. So there could be many, many things. And some of the things which I was discussing with Sugandha also a few days back. Am I clearly audible to all of you? I have stopped sharing my screen. Sugandha?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. So this is where I would want you people to understand that subaltern knowledge system which we need to bring in, it could be about anything. And like if I, the first thing that I took up was when we spoke about transgender. So can anyone tell me, I mean, you all, you might have watched this Tali on this web series Tali which came. Did you? Anyone has watched Tali? It was about the transgender Gauri Sawant.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Not many have heard, I guess. So Gauri Sawant was a transgender who has been able to win from the Supreme Court that she has got every right to be a mother, to have her kid along. And she is the one who gave a sense of self-respect to the transgender community. And after that only all these changes, whether it was like a few couple of years back in Noida, one of the metro stations hired a transgender. So that was a big thing in the news. And if we are able to make them come to the forefront, nothing like it. So I would like you to listen to this Gauri Sawant's video. Sugandha, the second one and first one is where Sushmita Sen would be speaking, and the second one is where Gauri Sawant herself speaks. Okay, so can you please play the second one first? I'll switch off my mic. You can play both one by one.
I will just play it in 1 second, ma'am. Just give me one second.
Yeah, please. Then we will discuss the idea.
अपने साथ जोड़ना चाहते हो?
बिल्कुल, जब मैं स्कूल में पढ़ती थी, भारत मेरा देश, सभी भारतीय मेरे बांधव है, तो मैं मेरे बाजू के लड़के देख के आंख मारा करती थी, क्योंकि मैं उसे कभी मेरा भाई मानती नहीं थी और वो मुझे बहन नहीं मानता था। इसी तरीके से आप सभी लोग, हम लोग स्कूल में पढ़े पुल्लिंगी, स्त्रीलिंगी, नपुंसकलिंगी, पर हम में से किसी ने भी हमारे गुरुजनों को नहीं पूछा होगा कि नपुंसकी का लिंगी का अर्थ क्या है। मेरी पहचान, मेरी शुरुआत वहां से हुई थी। मैं खुद को समझ ही नहीं पा रही थी कि मैं क्या हूँ। और जब हम लोग बड़ी बड़ी बातें करते कि जेंडर डिसऑर्डर या हर्मोफोडाइट या ट्रांसजेंडर, ये मेरे पले नहीं पड़ रहा था, मेरे घर वालों को भी नहीं समझ रहा था। इसका मतलब आज तक ये रहा है कि हमारे बीच हमेशा दूरी रही है, और वो कहीं ना कहीं मेरे जहन और हमेशा रहा है कि फैमिली से दूर। मैं हमेशा कहती हूँ कि मैंने एक हाथ का अंतर सभी से लिया है। मेरे फैमिली से, समाज से, सभी से। और मेरा एंटायर अगर आप ट्रांसजेंडर समाज देखोगे, आप हमेशा बोलोगे व्हाई दिस पीपल आर सो लाउड, इतने डार्क क्यों है, इतने अग्रेसिव क्यों है। तो आपको उसके पीछे की गरिमा भी समझनी पड़ेगी कि उसके पीछे का ये उद्रेक है, ये वायलेंस है, क्योंकि हमें हमारे ही परिवार से, मुझे मेरे कोई गुरु ने पैदा नहीं किया, मेरे माँ बाप ने पैदा किया, मेरे माँ बाप ने मुझे धुतकारा है, मुझसे पहचान छुपाई है, मुझे उनके घर से दूर निकाला है। तो वो एक गुस्सा, एक एंगर लेके ही मैं चलती हूँ। पर ये कब तक चलेगा, ये भी समझना पड़ेगा। जब हम पार्ट ऑफ सोसाइटी है, जब आप स्कूल में सीखे हो पुल्लिंगी, स्त्रीलिंगी, नपुंसकलिंगी, मुझे आज क्यों सुप्रीम कोर्ट जाना पड़ा? Why I have to go and knock the door of Supreme Court? मेरे लिए कोई गर्व की बात नहीं है कि मुझे भारत जैसे देश में, जहाँ पे हमारा इतिहास कहता है कि तृतीय पंथी थे, शिव, अगर हमें अर्धनारी नटेश्वर चलता है, विष्णु ने उस जमाने में सेक्स चेंज ऑपरेशन किया था, मोहिनी अवतार किया था, शिखंडी मेरे पूर्वज थे, फिर आज मैं चौराहे चौराहे पे भी क्यों मांग रही हो, आप मुझसे दूर क्यों कर रहे हो? ये सवाल के लिए मैं 2014 में जब सुप्रीम कोर्ट गई, और सुप्रीम कोर्ट की लड़ाई इतनी आसान नहीं थी, आप समझने की कोशिश करो। तब मुझे लगा कि जब मेरी जिंदगी में एक बच्ची आई, और तब मुझे लगा कि मुझे इसे लीगली अडॉप्ट करना है, तब मुझे सामने वाला किया, तुम कैसे अडॉप्ट कर सकते हो कि तुम्हारी खुद की कोई पहचान नहीं है। उस वक्त मेरी जर्नी चालू हुई थी।
Should I play the second video also, ma'am?
Yes, because Tali is, those who don't know, Tali is the Gauri Sawant, who you just now heard. She is the transgender who we are talking about, and Tali is based on her life, played by Sushmita Sen. So it is she would also speak, as well as Sushmita Sen also would speak. I did not bring in any clip from Tali itself, because that is something that you people can watch. But I want to raise a point, so you can just show that 1 minute clip. It is.
क्यों बचती है ताली? बस कुछ रुपए मांगने के लिए, आपका ध्यान खींचने के लिए, अपना गुस्सा निकालने के लिए, या अपनी घुटन छुपाने के लिए? क्या इसीलिए बजती रहेगी ताली?
नहीं, अब ताली बजेगी हौसला बढ़ाने के लिए, एक नई पहचान दिलाने के लिए, गूंज से आसमान हिलाने के लिए, सिर्फ हाथ नहीं तो दिल भी मिलाने के लिए। एक ताली उन सभी के लिए जो ताली बजाते थे, वो अब बजवाएंगे।
So before we proceed, this is one thing that we have to remember. We are talking of bringing the transgender voice in this forefront. When Tali came, for the first few weeks, it was a big hit. People started searching for Gauri Sawant, and suddenly people realized that yes, whatsoever she had done, it was right for her to fight for her identity, her dignity. And after that, it was again an oblivion. More importantly, as I realized, as I spoke to some people, whether they had watched Tali and what did they feel like, it was like many of them said, Tali, why should I? Trailer was good. I did not bring the trailer because I did not want to bring the trailer. That would have again put them back into the oblivion. Trailer was good. But बैठ के पूरी web series देखना, that too on a transgender? First, we have to change our mindset. That is very essential for us. If those who had watched also, later on, it was not Gauri Sawant who was remembered, it was Sushmita Sen who was remembered. Wow, kitni achhi acting kari. Sushmita Sen was brilliant. Discussions that I had with some of my students herein, it was like they started discussing about other heroes also. Lakshmi, how Akshay Kumar did that. But nobody is bothered about the transgender at all. This is what needs to change if we really want to talk about it is again back to square one. What Spivak said, can the subaltern speak? As long as Mahashweta Devi, as long as Arundhati Roy, as long as Shushmita Sen, they speak, we are happy, because literature gives us happiness. It has an aesthetic appeal. But here, in what I am talking of is not the aesthetic appeal. I am talking of that literature has to be the voice to bring the change. Literature can be the tool to actually bring about the sustainable development. Presently, I'm teaching Eat, Pray, Love in my JP to my students. So when we talk of Eat, Pray, Love, Elizabeth, she goes to Bali in the third phase. She goes through Italy, then she goes to India, and then to Bali. So Eat is Italy, Pray is India, and Bali is this. So Bali is a very small land in Indonesia, which is, Indonesia is a land wherein you have got lots of Muslims. Islam as thriving religion there. But Bali is a very small land which has still got its culture, and Elizabeth in Eat, Pray, Love speaks about that culture, the indigenous knowledge of sustaining relationship, through which she is able to get her relationship back. That is, she is able to self-realize about herself. And more importantly, there is a medicine man there, Ketut. Okay, so now there could be lots of medicines which could have healing power in Bali, in India, and many other places, in Sri Lanka, in Africa, in America, South America. And what I'm talking of is the indigenous medicines, which would again be subaltern when we compare them with the binary of allopathic. So when I'm talking of subaltern theory or subalternity, then again, because we have been subalterns, so our medicines, it's not about Ketut, it is not about Bali, it is about, if I come back to India only, as I was telling you that, we have got AQI of 500 at Delhi. So, it's all smog here. So every parent, including me, we are all surfing through how can we save our kids from the lungs problem, which might become imminent in the coming days. So there was this Triphala I came across. That Triphala, if you keep it for one full night soaked, and then next day you give the water, so it is actually a lungs cleansing agent. So I told one of my colleagues when we were going to office that this is what I went through, and that professor is a scientist himself. He belongs to physics, and he has got lots of research work in physics, and because he comes from that domain of scientific inquiry. Okay, so his reaction was, मैम कर तो लें, बट इसकी कुछ गड़बड़ हो गई तो? मैंने कहा गड़बड़ मतलब? तो उन्होंने कहा मतलब ये है कि इसकी कोई वो कभी करी नहीं है ना किसी ने, मतलब इसको एक बार हमें देखना चाहिए एक्सपेरिमेंट करके. It should be brought to the lab. He has a 5-year-old child, so from his perspective as a father, I could well understand, because he is a scientific man, so of course he would not experiment. It would always be allopathic medicine. रोज वो उनको उसको एंटीबायोटिक से लेके कफ सिरप से लेके सब चीजें खिला रहे हैं. But this is something that is, unless until it undergoes that thing of scientific inquiry, he wouldn't believe in that. And as soon as it becomes a turmeric latte, we all are ready to believe that. Now, this is the point that I'm trying to say. Allopathy would never allow homeopathy, which is another subaltern, or our Ayurveda to come unless until we speak for that. And when we spoke, you see the difference. Who was ever aware that millet could have so much of benefits to the health? So when we talk of the rice, wheat versus millet, so rice, wheat, these were the upper ones, and millet was, Hindi mein you call it mota anaj. Garib khate hain. So we are not supposed to have in India also. But once Indian government, India decided to bring it to the forefront, UNO had to declare 2023 as the year of the millet. So then the whole world realized that millet was so important for us. it was helpful in not only diabetes. I mean, I'm not for millet. I'm not saying I'm going to be a spokesman, but what I'm trying to say is that there were so many religious, medicinal things which were associated with millets that today you search for YouTube, you would have millet recipes available. So how did millet after so many years come to the forefront? That is subaltern indigenous knowledge of India. Not only climate wise, if I'm talking of now sustainable development, then it does not require, I mean, I was just reading somewhere that if a rice requires 6,000 liters of water, millet requires only 200 liters of water. So the places where there is a scarcity of water, then we should always be going after millet. But what would that poor farmer do if there is no taker for the millet? And once we tell the people, again, marketing strategy, that millet is so healthy, we are ready to listen then, and then the market would be full of millet and the farmer also would be able to bring in. But then it does not mean that initially when we did not know, millet was not healthy for us. Indigenous knowledge is always going to be beneficial to all of us, whether it is millet, whether it is triphala, whether it is what I was speaking about the other day about an eat frela. So, but then who allows them to come to the forefront? And that is where I would bring in literature as being one of the most crucial organs. And gone are the days when people used to read. So we have to also change that mindset. Maybe I mean, amongst all the people of English, I would be the one who would say, or rather I would say that it is my students who have made me realize this thing, that I cannot go and ask them to read literature. Print literature is something which today's students are not going to read and really learn, but learning is essential. So when I talk of visual literature, movies can be one of the biggest voices, biggest agents, biggest tools to bring about the change. So out of 100 moviegoers, even if 5 are able to be convinced about something, at least that subalternity would be in the forefront. That is what Satyajit Roy did, but that is where you have to understand that it has to be in the middle. It has to be from the marginal sections towards the mainstream that we are talking of. So whether it is visual literature, I would rather say go with the virtual literature also. Use the games as the platform to actually bring in all sorts of indigenous knowledge to the forefront. Then only is this possible. Another example, I mean, one of the last examples, if I'm not taking too much of your time, I have time now. So, I mean, these are all my own, I mean, these are not something that are there in the books. These are the research areas which I do discuss with my colleagues, with my students, and I'm just discussing them with you, giving you some foods for thought, which maybe you can take further. So today, suddenly, whole of the world is after yoga. We are all celebrating the Yoga Day. World has realized yoga to be so important too. So yoga was subaltern at one point of time or not? How did it come to the forefront? It was we who actually again and again popularized it, and suddenly the word became so important. I mean, they realized the importance of yoga. So in the same way, when we talk of philosophical realms, so Gita, Bhagavad Gita, our Upanishads, they have always been given lots of importance. But there are certain meditation techniques along with yoga which have never been given importance to. One of my students is doing a research in transcendental meditation, and she shares with me transcendental meditation nowadays is very famous in the West, because just as you had the beat movement, there were all these hippies and all these beat generation which got into the beat movement, and they brought in our lots of cultural things into the West. So there are certain Hollywood actors who are very regular practitioners of transcendental movement. So Maharshi Yogi, who is the founder of transcendental meditation, he took it to the West, and there are Maharshi universities everywhere in the West as well as in India also. Ab dheere dheere wapas aa rahe. But what I'm trying to say is transcendental meditation is from India. It is not from West. but it has been able to come from the margins to the center stage when they gave voice to it. And today, AIMS is doing projects wherein they are trying to make patients do transcendental meditation. I mean, my student is part of that. And we are capturing images of the brain, images of the heart, how it is actually beneficial to your brain and your heart. So this is something, this is indigenous knowledge, but nobody knew about it unless and until we are ready to listen to. So if you go and tell, if you really want to bring a change in the society, you have to use the cinema, you have to use visual literature, you have to use the virtual literature, that is your games, and you have to bring them from the periphery to the mainstream. Why is it so that suddenly everybody was interested in dinosaurs 1 decade back? So every movie was talking about dinosaurs. Every game was all about dinosaurs. So our subaltern indigenous knowledge is like that dinosaur, which has not been explored for 200 years, 300 years, 400 years. And it is not about, I'm talking of only India, that indigenous knowledge could be anywhere in Sri Lanka, in South America, in African countries, it could be anywhere. So that indigenous knowledge of the oppressed, that is other to the other, that needs to be brought about. There is this new on Netflix, somebody was telling me that there is a Kala Pani series which has come in, which talks about some virus from the water. And in that, as this lady told me, that indigenous knowledge of that Sri Lankan tribe helps in fighting that virus. So they never gave importance to that. So, I mean, I am talking of the realities. This is what we need to bring about through the virtual literature and through the visual literature. And as a student of literature, as a teacher of literature, the first thing that I have to realize is literature is encompassing everything. It is not print literature alone, which is literature. And we have to use the medium of different forms of literature to actually bring the change and bring the subaltern to the middle. So herein, this is where I would just take 1 minute, because there are 2 movies that I would want you to see. One is Jai Bhim. I guess all of you might have heard about Jai Bhim. If you have not seen, there was this Justice Chandru. He fought for a tribal, that tribal which was not even, I mean, when you watch it, that short clip of his last fighting for that tribal, if you watch it was, I mean, just sharing on a personal level, that whosoever I have spoken to, even kids, when they have watched Jai Bhim, they have said, yes, it was good. Initially, it was boring, but later on, the message that it was able to deliver was good. So this is what I want you people to understand. So just give me 2 minutes. I'll play it, Sugandha, because it's a long dialogues of many movies. So I just want to play that clip only. Okay. I'll share my screen.
Sure, ma'am.
Visible?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
तिरुला आदिवासियों को उनके गांव में भी रहने नहीं देते। कई सालों पहले जिनकी तीरंदाजी की वाहवाही होती थी उन्हें कोई नहीं पूछता। सरकार भी उनके साथ अनाथों की तरह सुलूक करती है।
मिस्टर चंद्रू, इज दिस अ हाई कोर्ट और अ हिस्ट्री क्लास? आई डोंट
इतिहास
अंडरस्टैंड।
भूल गए इसीलिए ये नौबत आई है। तमिल राज्य के मूल निवासियों के साथ घिनौना सुलूक कर रही है हमारी सरकार। 2-4 पैसे कमाने के लिए दिन रात मेहनत करने वाली सेंगिनी, लाखों रुपए देकर उसे केस दबाने को कहा। उसने कहा उसे पैसे नहीं चाहिए, उसे अदालत से उम्मीद है और इस अदालत का फर्ज है कि वो सेंगिनी का कानून पर जो भरोसा है उसे टूटने ना दे। और जो इस राज्य का इतिहास नहीं जानते, ये सेंगिनी जो अपने पति की गई हत्या का इंसाफ चाहती है वो सेंगिनी नहीं है, बल्कि वो तो आज की कन्नगी है। और इसका पिटीशन आज के जमाने का सिलपतिकारक है। इतिहास दोहराया जाएगा या इसे इंसाफ मिलेगा, इसका फैसला मैं कोर्ट पर छोड़ता हूं। माय लॉर्ड्स, गुनहगारों को कड़ी से कड़ी सजा मिलनी चाहिए। जिनका नुकसान हुआ है उन्हें भरपाई मिलनी चाहिए। अमीरुल्लाह आदिवासियों के सम्मान की बातें तो करते हैं, लेकिन आज भी उन्हीं के गांव में उन्हें रहने नहीं देते। मैं चाहता हूं सेंगिनी को शहर में एक घर बनाने की जगह दी जाए। ये लॉकअप में हुए किसी मर्डर का कोई आम केस नहीं है। ये एक ऐसी आदिवासी औरत के हक की लड़ाई है जिसकी कोई मदद नहीं करना चाहता और जिसके ऊपर रोज नए जुल्म किए जा रहे हैं। यही हेबस कॉर्पस पिटीशन है। कोर्ट का फैसला उसे इंसाफ भी देगा और उम्मीद भी। That's all, my lords.
I would say one thing more. I mean, I would rather say everybody should give some time to watch Jai Bhim, because this is what is one of the first things that can happen. Even if somebody tries to bring them to the periphery, there is nobody as a taker. We want, I mean, we don't see movies, first of all, as virtual literature, visual literature, definitely. So even if we are able to see it, we would rather enjoy the movies. So if we really, at least as teachers of literature, we could use these platforms and bring in some change in the mindset of our students, the coming generations, then maybe it would go en masse. So there is one movie, I mean, this was told to me by my students rather. I was not the one who told it. And I watched it because then my students told me, ma'am, because you belong to Bangalore, because my family settled in Bangalore. So ma'am, aapke Karnataka ki movie hai. So there was this Kantara movie. It was a huge hit. None of my students could understand, and I cannot claim that I also understood too much. But what I'm trying to say about Kantara is that it brought us very close to our existence, about our belief system. And if I try to relate Kantara with like, I am religious, I believe in my God, and if I go scientifically, it is just I mean, stone that I'm worshipping. So that is as good as what Kantara tries to say, that it is all in the belief system, and it cleanses your mind, your soul, and brings you very closer. And that is one of the reasons why many of us could not understand, but we all enjoyed. And there was nothing to enjoy also. I mean, it was not about songs and dance or anything else. It was just like it gave us a food for thought, and it gave us a satisfaction. So this is where I would like to end my this whole thing, that if we really want to bring a change into the society, then we have to decide how we are going to give them voice, whether it is like there are unlimited numbers like Delhi Crime Series. If you remember, there was this tribal thing in series 2, Super 30. That was also one very important movie that we can think of, but they are on our fingertips, very few. So again, another movie has come in, so we can end with that thing. Sugandha, if you want to play, you can play. That is 12th Fail. And I have been told that it's a beautiful movie. I just put in the trailer here. I felt, because I have not seen the movie, so I cannot bring in like which clips to show you. But I felt that this was what we all need to think, that it should not be like movies come and movies go, and then we forget them. If they are voicing for the subalterns, whether it was Super 30 or whether it was, as I said, Kantara or whatsoever movie it was, we should be willing to actually be the agents of change by bringing them to the forefront. So I was told, and when I was searching for this trailer of Barbie Fail on IMDb, and this is the note on which I would end. It released on Friday. Now it is 9.3. So that means our next generation is ready to bring the change. So this is what we have to think of, that if we are talking of subalterns to be heard, we have to listen to them, learn from them, and change the world for the best. Then only the sustainable development is possible. So it cannot be just that they would come and they would go and we would just forget. Otherwise, it would again be subalternity into the oblivion. So we cannot let that happen. We have to change ourselves if we want to make for the sustainable development. West should not tell us turmeric latte is really good. We have to realize that yes, whether it is haldi ka doodh or whether it is triphala or whatsoever it is, I mean, I'm not saying don't go for scientific inquiry. Go for scientific inquiry, but at least start believing in your own indigenous knowledges. I mean, your indigenous knowledge system will always be subaltern if we are not ready to bring them to the forefront. Then only sustainable development is possible. So I would end with the Barbie Fail, that the change has started, but let us continue with the change and not let it down. We as teachers also can bring in that change. So I'll stop my mic. My share screen is not quite.
You want me to share the screen of that
Yes, Barbie
trailer?
Fail. Yes, the last one.
Yes. Okay.
दो लाख हिंदी मीडियम विद्यार्थियों में से केवल 25-30 ही बन पाते हैं IAS, IPS। बाकी 1,99,970 back to 0। पड़ गया।
ये जो फाइन के नाम तू मांग रहा है ना, ये घूस है। घूसखोरी कर रहा है तो इसको कुर्सी पे बैठ गया।
अबे जबान बहुत ज्यादा चला रहा है तो।
चलाना शुरू कहाँ किया अब तक? चंबल का हूँ, समझा? IPS बन गया ना, तो पहला लेटर जो साइन करूंगा तेरी सस्पेंशन का होगा, ये बात याद रखना। तो
IAS बनना बड़ी बात नहीं है। बड़ी बात ये है कि जिस कुर्सी पर आप बैठेंगे ना, उससे आपकी इज्जत ना हो, बल्कि आपसे उस कुर्सी की इज्जत बढ़े। चलिए अब पढ़ाई शुरू करेंगे, लेकिन उससे पहले आप में एक लड़का है कोई जिसका नाम है मनोज कुमार शर्मा। कौन है मनोज?
अपनी सबसे बनकर ही लौटी। तुझे वर्दी में देख के तेरे दादाजी बहुत खुश हो गए।
हिंदी मीडियम।
जी भैया।
कंट्री के हर कोने से भेड़ बकरियों की तरह आ जाते हैं दिल्ली।
मैं भी बनूंगा IPS।
पढ़ाई के अलावा सब तरह की गधा मजदूरी में लग जाते हैं।
टॉयलेट रोज साफ होना चाहिए।
नहीं बनने वाले तुम लोग IPS ऑफिसर्स।
सही बात कर रहे हो। चले आते हैं भेड़ बकरियों की तरह बसों और ट्रेनों में भर भर। कुछ नहीं होता इनके पास। गरीब होता है इनका बाप, नहीं पढ़ा पाते बाप अपने बच्चा को महंगा स्कूल कॉलेज में। लेकिन पता है फिर भी ये लोग खाली हाथ नहीं आते, जज्बा लेके आते हैं कि ये लोग भी ना एक दिन IAS IPS बनेंगे।
कनपट्टी को जाके बीती रात,
ये पीछे नहीं हटते, ये नीचे नहीं झुकते, हार नहीं मानते सब। बड़ा पक्का होता है इनका ये जज्बा, और तुम देखना यही जज्बा एक दिन देश बदलेगा।
फेल फेल हो गया। नेक्स्ट
भैया कुछ बन जाओ, वरना छोड़ के चली जाएगी वो। लूजर्स के साथ कोई नहीं टिकता भाई।
क्या समझ रहा है तू? सिर्फ तुम्हारा लड़ाई है ये, हम सबका लड़ाई है। एक का भी जीत होगा ना तो करोड़ों भेड़ बकरी का जीत होगा।
हाँ छोड़ो, इसमें थोड़ा मेरी बात
समझोगे सदा, तुम्हारी और मेरी दुनिया बहुत अलग है।
चोर की बात
रीस्टार्ट।
Yes, so I'm ready for the questions. I guess I have been able to do a little justice to what I wanted to do. I've been able to reach to all of you with my point of view. So any questions?
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for giving us so many points to ponder upon and helping us to reflect on how we are supposed to change our mindset for sustainable development. Now, our next segment is question and answer. So I will request Harshita to ask the questions to ma'am, whichever questions have been posted by the participants, please.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you for such a wonderful and informative lecture. So the first question is from Arzu. Can we say that Dalit literature comes under the umbrella term subaltern studies, or will it be considered entirely a separate canon of literature by itself?
Could you please come back, Harshita? There is actually an earthquake which came just now here, and so
okay,
it was like, yeah, please.
Can Dalit literature come under the umbrella term subaltern studies, or will it be considered entirely a separate canon of literature by itself?
See, Harshita, what I am proposing is that Dalit literature should be a different canon if we are trying to talk about only the Dalit literature. Because when we talk of subaltern literature, as I said, that my way of thinking is very different. It is other to the other. So when we talk of subaltern literature as it has been till now, just as at one point of time, even feminist literature, queer theory, gender studies, these were all different terms and terminologies which were part of feminist literature only. Then later on, they all came under gender studies. So if we want to bring in like in terms of how do you put in different umbrella terms, then maybe one under another, we can go on making it. But then when we talk of queer theory, LGBT studies, they cannot be justified with the broad term gender studies, can they be? So if you really need to justify, then you have to call it like queer theory, LGBT theory. In the same way, when we talk of Dalit literature, now there is another term which is used, fourth world literature. So can we justify with this question that it is fourth world? So there are lots of other to the other. So Dalit is one segment. So if you want to give them the whole voice, then make it a complete literature. And it is a complete literature. It is just like autobiographies are part of non-fiction. But autobiographies are autobiographies, no? Memoirs were part of autobiography, but memoirs are memoirs. Right? Have I been able to
Thank you,
convince,
ma'am. So the next,
asked?
yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. So the next question is from Arzu again. Can we say Haldi Ka Doodh is a form of manifestation of double consciousness engraved in Indians at an unconscious level, probably?
Exactly, it is. As I said that yoga became important for Indians also when West started doing yoga. Is it so that yoga was today only? Yoga has been there forever in India. But our kids would rather go to gym. They would use all sorts of those elliptical bikes and or bhi jo bhi hote honge, I don't know what are those things. Why would somebody just put up a yoga mat and do yoga? So it is already there in our subconscious mind, and it needs to be, it's like we are erasing that. And not only subconscious, it is more, I would say more, I mean, tip of the icebergs ke bhi bahut niche hai. It is more in your unconscious mind, which is being pulled by the West to the subconscious mind. And then you start thinking, yes, it is important. Another example, when she says like, so doodh ka milk, haldi ka doodh kyo? There was this nariyal pani, if you remember, coconut water. So today, suddenly, the world realized the importance of coconut water in India post-COVID. And see the marketing strategy, tumhari unconsciousness dekho, I mean, not you, Harshita. This is to all of us. But because तुम्हारा generation ज़्यादा जाता है इन सब चीज़ों में, I always tell my students, तुम वो बाहर 60 rupees का जो नारियल का पानी पीते हैं, वो नहीं पियोगे, वो hygienic नहीं होगा. वही वो bottle में बेचेगा, तो it becomes very hygienic. है ना? So this is, I mean, it is there in your unconscious, subconscious mind. It needs to be pulled out. And that is what I'm saying, change your mindset. Unless and until you people change your mindset, we people change our mindset, it's not going to happen.
Thank you, ma'am. So the next question is from Shiva Dikshit. Can we consider Babu fiction by Tabish Khair in subaltern studies? Babu fiction is another genre in Indian literature in subaltern studies.
Babu fiction, that is Babudam wala jo fiction tha. See, when we started off with subaltern studies was all about Marxism, then to historiography, then to feminist studies, and nowadays it is centered around the cultural studies more. So these are all the subgenres of that big jar. I am a little critical. I chose subaltern studies, but I have never been a very big fan of subaltern studies. At that time, when I talk of Babudam, yeah, jitne bhi hamare all these theoretical aspects have been there, it is more like they started off on the right note. They all started off with an agenda to bring change. But later on, it was more of a fashion statement in literature. So that's the reason why they all lost their, appeal to literature students. So that is where Babu fiction can be called as part of subaltern studies. It was part of studies initially, but as I said, that everybody wants to have one's own individual entity. So they all decided to go their own way. And I would just say one more thing, because there is one more question that I can see in the chat box. When we talk of literature, as a student, because I think many of them are MA students, as it can be seen here in written. There is one Devansh Srivastav also, he has written a wonderful question, as I can see. We need to bring in, I have been a student of theories. One of my favorite theories is reader response theory. Deconstruction I always loved, but deconstruction is there for readers only. So I would just suggest to all my students who are there that start using your response in the positive manner, so that you are able to understand it's not about your horizons of expectations being met. It is about both of the horizons of expectations, whether it is of the writer and whether it is of the reader. Both have to be met, and somewhere both have to take their steps forward to bring the change. So being critical, being always, both the fronts, either you are very critical or you just accept whatsoever is delivered to you. Both are, two opposite things and not too good. Binaries are never too good. So that is where we need to think of that if somebody is giving something. That is why I said that in my talk, I would give you food for thought. It's not necessary that you have to say yes to me. You have to agree with me. But use your mind to see, and even if little, Spivak gave me a food for thought, na? So when Spivak said this thing, then only I started thinking, so use your day-to-day activities, day-to-day, I would say, even when you talk to people, mere jitne bhi ideas hain, if you see, they are from general life ideas. When I drive, I speak to my colleague, whatsoever we discuss, that is also part of literature. That is also part of education system. When I watch something, I should be taking something from it, and I should be able to use it for the betterment of not only myself, my intellectual capacity, but of everyone who I speak to. So be your own judge and be a little humble also. Both the things are important. Reader response is most important there. Anyway, Yes. Have I been
Thank
able
you,
to
ma'am.
answer,
So
Harshita?
the last question is, yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. So the last question is from Mantasha. Are there specific literary techniques or approaches that writers use to amplify the voices of subalterns effectively, creating a lasting impact on readers and society?
Yes, that's one of my favorite questions. Sugandha and Tulika would know that I have always been about theories and after the theories. Just a moment. So just give me. I'll drink water and I'll answer because I will give it in detail. I have time, I guess, 5 to 10 minutes, so that I
Ma'am,
can
no
give in
problem.
detail. Yes.
Yes,
Just
yes,
give me.
ma'am.
Really. Yes. So when we talk of the writer's writing, any writer who decides to write has got something inside, deep inside, compulsion inside, that he or she cannot keep it into oneself and wants to share it. So the first form of writing which comes in is in form of blog or autobiography or something like diary notes kind of thing. But once we decide that it is not going to be inside the cupboard, it has to be outside. It has to be with the public. That means you are out of closet writing and you want to convince the reader with something, with your point of view, right? So every writer, whether it is of subaltern studies or whether the writer is of any other genre, would always have the implied reader in mind. One cannot write without the implied reader in mind. And he or she would always try to analyze the horizons of expectations of that particular reader. I'm using the terms from reader response theory here. But unconsciously, subconsciously, and today consciously, the writers do that. Because unless and until, and you just cannot go and sell your book. You need to have your target reader, target audience, and you need to understand what is, I mean, when I spoke of, if you see, if each one of us are writers, right? We are all are agents of change. When we speak to someone, I knew that, okay, this was Sugandha and Tulika doing the FDP. So there would be lots of younger people who would be there. So definitely in FDP nowadays, I mean, if it had been a conference, not to criticize that way, but FDP क्या होता है ना, Sugandha हम सब के लिए ये होता है कि it is more of a certificate that we all are in need of. So 6 days, 7 days, we all do. कि एक अच्छा सा certificate API score बढ़ जाएगा. So my target audience is not going to be like the professors, different professors who I would be speaking to. Had my target audience been that, then my examples would have been different. But I know my target audience is somewhere in between, maybe 20 to 40-year-old. So I have to give examples which they would be able to find affinity with. So my implied reader is there already. And I have already done understanding, I mean, I have had an understanding of what is expected by them, horizons of expectations. And accordingly, I would use my transactional analysis to find out my जो भी मुझे दिखाना था, ठीक है? So this is what every writer does, whether it is a subaltern writer. So think over, when Mahashweta Devi writes, she has her own target audience or not? In the same way, when Valmiki wrote, he had his own target audience. Where Arundhati Roy wrote, she had her own target audience. Are you getting it? In the same way, when I say Elizabeth, Each Frailer was written. I forget the name of the writer. So Gilbert, she was undergoing a divorce and she was in a traumatic, depressive state of mind. So her target audience was very different. So every writer keeps in mind what he or she wants to talk about and who is going to understand what he or she is talking about. So these theories are inevitably part of the writing strategy also. and your understanding strategy as well. Okay, have I been able to do justice, Harshita?
Yes, ma'am.
Because
Thank you for
once
answering
you
all the
start with
questions
theories,
patiently.
no, because theories are unending, and these kind of answers can go on for, just as Partha Chatterjee said. I did not play that part when he was asked like, how do you define subaltern? So he said that I can speak on this for 2 minutes and I can speak it for on it for 2 hours also. So it's just the same for my answers also. I know many of you
Thank you
might
so
have
much,
to go
ma'am.
to home. I mean, you might be uh, ending your whole hectic day preparing for tomorrow. So, I mean, that's why my answer stands still here only.
Uh, Thank you so much, ma'am. We would have loved to hear you for another 2 hours, but yes, time constraints for all of us.
Nay, now I also have got my throat constraint. Otherwise, I also would have continued for another 2 hours.
All right, ma'am. I would take this opportunity to extend my heartfelt gratitude for such an enriching and informative session. And thank you for answering each question so patiently. It was such a beautiful, healthy exchange of question and answers. And I'm sure all of us are going to reflect on how we can rewrite history and help ourselves by getting the marginalized subaltern to come to the mainstream in whatever little way we can to begin with for a holistic, sustainable development. And ma'am, I can't help but express that I am personally very happy to listen to you after almost a decade. I had to say that. And I would like to thank all the participants for joining. And I would like to thank the organizing team also. The feedback form has been posted in the chat box. Kindly fill the feedback form for your attendance. It is mandatory. And please note that today the feedback form will not be posted on the WhatsApp group. So please fill the form, and after that you can leave the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day, all of you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Monali, ma'am. You can also, ma'am, leave the meeting. I think her video has.
They would be able to find affinity. With.
Thank you, ma'am.